what was the starting point for how you decided to create this show?
So I thought of the concept for Manifest, believe it or not, over 10 years ago when I was driving my family minivan with my wife and 4 kids halfway between LA and the Grand Canyon. I was just being a Machiavellian TV writer trying to think about a big, sexy idea. And ideally an idea that was huge and compelling, but also incredibly emotional at its core. And I was on this family vacation and thinking about the importance of family togetherness and what might be a big idea that would tear a family apart and create long-lasting ramifications. And so that's where it began. It was just a high-concept idea about something that splits a family in two and then would launch a journey as a family tries to come back together again. So that was a long time ago. And then and I pitched it all around and nobody wanted it. And then 6 years went by, 7 years went by, and then Malaysian Airlines happened. And all of a sudden, my crazy pie-in-the-sky idea, thank you so much, my crazy pie-in-the-sky idea felt a little bit more real, relatable, and I was busy working on another show. And so a couple more years went by, and then I took this out again, and now I can talk about Malaysian Airlines in the context of this and say, what if? And everybody said, yeah, what if? And this time we generated a lot of interest, and happily we ended up at NBC.
Well, so speaking of family being torn apart,
yeah.
What are the ramifications for the family, and how do they interact with one another when the people who were on the plane return?
So one of the interesting things about the premise of the show is that we tear a couple relationships apart and then bring them back together in a way that is incredibly complicated but without moral culpability. There are 2 core relationship triangles at the center of the show. There's a marriage in which a wife has understandably moved on. There is a broken engagement in which a fiancé has understandably moved on, and now everybody comes back together again. No one is to blame, and yet it's incredibly complicated, and affections are torn. The heart is pulled in all these different directions, and as we launch into series, those who had been left behind are dealing with the consequences of a passage of time, having mourned the loss of lovers, of children, healed, moved on with their lives, and then only to have the past thrown back in their faces. So that's half the equation. On the other hand, those who are on the plane have had no passage of time. For them, it's been a day. And so they come home to this incredible shock to the system where the rest of the world has moved on, loved ones have moved on, but their heart and head are in the same place that they were yesterday. And so it's an incongruous dichotomy for those who had been left behind and had the passage of time, and on the other hand, those who were on the plane and have had no passage of time. And so the fact that their headspace is completely different adds an extra layer of complexity, and that's part of the confusion and moral ambiguity as we get into episodes 2, 3, and 4. And that's just the relationship side of the show. And then there's an investigation, and then there's the weird stuff that starts happening inside their heads, which just add to the complexity.
Can you talk a little bit more about, is it precognition or is it something else? What goes on with all of their heads?
So I'm going to let the audience and all of you experience in real time the specific answer to those questions, because at the heart of the mythology of the show will be a tug-of-war asking the fundamental questions that you're asking. Has what happened to these people stemmed from something supernatural, or has it stemmed from something scientific? Has it stemmed from something divine? And the 2 heroes of the show, Michaela and Ben, brother and sister, represent kind of the 2 competing points of view, science versus faith. Josh Dallas's character, Ben, he's kind of my Richard Dreyfuss from Close Encounters, kind of a scientific mind, digging for answers, tenacious, certain that something earthbound can explain what's happened. On the other hand, his sister, Michaela, played by Melissa Roxburgh, she's kind of a lapsed person of faith. Her mother was incredibly religious. Her mother's passed away during the interim when she, Michaela, was on the plane. And so she's grappling with the loss of her mom and yet can't help feeling the spirituality that her mother had tried to infuse in her throughout her life. And so this science versus faith conversation will play out in series as they try to search for answers. And by the end of our first order, halfway through, hopefully season 1, there'll be data points that have come forward that seem to support both schools of thought. And that'll be an ever-evolving question in the series.
With a show like this, do you have a 5-year plan? Do you have, or how far out do you have to think to kind of put the pieces together?
So I do. I have what I would call a 6-year plan. When I went in to pitch the show to studios and networks last year, I knew in order to sell a show like this that is so premise-oriented and could go in any number of directions, that the buyers would want to know that I had a roadmap. And so I created that roadmap, and even when I went in and pitched the show, I walked the executives through broad strokes about 6 years. I know my end game. I have some big kind of goalposts along the way, and then I have my writer's room to help me fill in the gaps. But there's certainly a plan, and we certainly know where we're going.
We have one big mystery if you're starting the first season and then sort of solving, or is it going to be one longer line up until the end game?
So there's one ultimate mystery with an end game that will carry us through the season. So we're not resetting season to season. The show's not an anthology. This will be one series-long novelistic event mystery for the audience to follow. But I think of it as having chapters. There's an endpoint in chapter 1. In fact, there's an endpoint halfway through season 1, around episode 13, that's going to give us a significant pivot in our mythology. And then by the time we get to the end of season 1, there'll be another pivot point. And by the time we get into season 2, we'll have blown open our mythology in a significant way. Another interesting component about the show, which I think will be satisfying for viewers, is that even while the show is a serialized mystery and a relationship drama that obviously inches along week to week, there will be closed-ended missions, if you will, on a week-to-week basis. So the audience will have an opportunity to kind of enjoy a satisfying, closed-ended B-story, if you will, each week, even while we're following serialized stories elsewhere in the episodes.
Ben's son is on the plane.
That's right.
So sometimes shows choose to, go the route of having like a really special mythical child at its core. So is he going to fulfill that role, or is it more for the drama of, having the family interaction?
Right. So Ben's son is Cal. Cal's a major part of the story. Yes, he does have a pivotal role in our mythology, and he's going to prove to be one of the more important characters in the unraveling of our mythology. He's also at the core of our family drama, because we learn at the very beginning of the pilot episode that this little boy is sick, and one of the miracles of his disappearance and return is that when he has come back, we come to discover that it's a new lease on life for him, which is one of the happier aspects of the plane's disappearance and return. But it proves to be very complicated. There's an asterisk kind of next to Cal's journey that we'll come to discover as we unfold the episodes.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much.